I'm going to read more from The Hunt Itself, the Structural Dissociation book. This is from chapter 5. This chapter really focuses a lot on how structural dissociation doesn't always look like stereotypical dissociation, and kind of all of the different ways that it can look, and like kind of how and why some of that gets missed. Currently, in the field of trauma, dissociation is viewed as merely one of many symptoms rather than as an underlying organization of system complexes. Thus, many clinicians dismiss dissociation as mild in some patients and may fail to understand that other symptoms, such as more complex behavior that include current substance abuse, affect dysregulation, or chronic difficulties in relationships, may well have an underlying dissociative nature. After all, one of the hallmarks of dissociation is that some symptoms are not immediately obvious and may even be intentionally hidden or dissimulated by a frightened or ashamed individual. Alterations of consciousness, such as spacing out and absorption, like getting super absorbed in something you're reading or watching or that kind of a thing, are described as dissociative, although they occur nearly universally and are perfectly normal when transient and mild, and often do not involve structural dissociation of the personality. This confusion opens the door to a lack of consensus as to which symptoms and disorders belong to the domain of trauma-related dissociations and which do not. The second problem is that the arbitrary relegation of dissociation as a division of the personality only to some dissociative disorders, in particular DID. Dissociation found in other disorders, such as PTSD or borderline personality disorder, seems to mean something entirely different in the literature from that described in DID. The third problem is that it can be difficult to assess whether or not a phenomenon is a manifestation of structural dissociation, that is, a dissociative symptom, or whether it is something else. For example, abnormal levels of forgetfulness may be a manifestation of dementia, a brain tumor, exhaustion, intoxication, or structural dissociation. Similarly, a different sense of self may be due to major depression, exhaustion, intoxication, or structural dissociation. The proof that symptoms are manifestations of structural dissociation lies in demonstrating that one part of the personality recalls a memory or has experiences that another part does not. New passage, dissociative symptoms. Symptoms of dissociation proper have been inconsistently charted in the current literature. Many modern discussions of dissociative symptoms, in particular in the PTSD literature, only refer to negative dissociative symptoms, those related to a loss of mental actions, such as perceptions, affects, memories, and loss of mental functions, as the ability to focus on the present or the ability to control one's behavior. Their counterpart, positive dissociative symptoms, such as intrusions of traumatic memory and voices, are rarely mentioned, with very few exceptions related to DID patients. Negative dissociative symptoms denote mental and physical phenomena that are not available to one or more parts of the personality, but are available to others. These symptoms thus are not absolute losses, because a complete loss, such as a complete forgetting, would occur across the entire personality, not just in certain parts of the personality. Rather, in the case of dissociative amnesia, one part does not have access to a particular memory while another part does. So an important thing to keep in mind here is basically the way that they're using negative and positive is negative kind of takes away from and positive adds to. Genet observed that negative symptoms are more persistent and permanent over time. In our language, this observation is from the perspective of the apparently normal part of the personality, or ANP, which has executive control most of the time. Positive symptoms tend to come and go with intrusion of the emotional part of the personality, which they call EP, into the ANP. However, in more complex cases of dissociation, EPs can also intrude into each other, and one ANP may also intrude into another ANP in cases of DID. One dissociative part, say an EP, can gain full executive control from another, say an ANP. This constitutes an extreme level of positive symptoms. Thus, positive symptoms can be generally described as mental and physical or behavioral phenomena that intrude or interrupt one or more parts of the personality and that represent features of one or more other parts of the personality. Positive symptoms might include memories available to these parts, their voices, intentions, perceptions, emotions, cognitions, or behaviors. Some authors recognize the dissociative nature of intrusions and interruptions of executive control. New passage. While symptoms of structural dissociation may be understood as positive or negative, they may also be understood as symptoms that manifest mentally, which we call psychoform dissociative symptoms, and in phenomena that manifest in the body, which we refer to as somatoform dissociative symptoms. Psychoform and somatoform dissociation are highly correlated phenomena. New passage. Dissociative symptoms have not been accurately described in the current literature. A more consistent and comprehensive understanding of dissociation can occur when both positive and negative symptoms are taken into consideration. That is, symptoms of intrusion and symptoms involving losses. Negative psychoform dissociative symptoms. The category of negative psychoform dissociation symptoms includes loss of memory, also called amnesia, loss of affect, also called numbing, loss of critical function and difficulty thinking things through, loss of needs, wishes, and fantasies, and loss of previously existing mental skills. The PTSD condition of detachment, numbing, and avoidance often pertains to negative dissociative symptoms. This condition also appears in other trauma-related disorders and constitutes symptoms in ANP. Negative dissociative symptoms can also be dominant in certain EPs that are fixed in freeze or in total submission. These parts can experience emotional and sensory anesthesia, loss of critical thinking, loss of skills, and loss of motor function. Some evidence suggests that dissociative amnesia is particularly characteristic of survivors of chronic childhood abuse and neglect, and perhaps even more so in patients who were abused by close relatives and caretakers. It is a major symptom of children and adults with DID, but also may characterize patients with DD-NOS, complex PTSD, and simple PTSD. Some individuals develop instant dissociative amnesia after their traumatic experiences. In some, it occurs after a delay, and still others, the symptoms may wax and wane, perhaps due to alternations among amnesic and non-amnesic parts of the personality. Dissociative amnesia occurs in varying degrees. For example, individuals may be unable to recall certain parts of a memory or may know what happened but may not recall the episode with a sense of personal ownership, a sense of it happened but not to me. Dissociative amnesia is a disorder in its own right. The DSM-4 classifies types of dissociative amnesia based on the works of Genet. These categories include localized, selective, generalized, continuous, and systemized. In localized amnesia, the individual fails to recall events that occurred during a circumscribed period of time, usually the first few hours following a profoundly disturbing event. This is an anecdote and it includes a essay reference. After Sandy was raped when she was 19, she could not remember how she got away from her perpetrator or how she got home, though she remembered most of the rape itself. Localized amnesia may pertain to events of a short duration, such as one traumatizing event. In selective amnesia, the individuals recall some but not all of the events during a circumscribed period of time. It is not uncommon for a survivor to remember large portions of traumatizing events, but be unable to recall a pathogenic kernel or hotspot. Tina recalled that her uncle had often molested her, but it was only in therapy when she remembered that he had killed her pet as a way of threatening her not to tell. Systematized amnesia is a loss of memory for certain categories of information, such as all memories relating to one's family or to a particular person. In generalized amnesia, the failure of recall encompasses the person's entire life. This is the John Doe version of amnesia, where individuals have no idea who they are, where they are from, or any other generalities of their lives. This type is rare. Finally, the DSM-4 defines continuous amnesia as the inability to recall all events subsequent to a specific time up to and including the present. This is an extremely rare form of dissociative amnesia that may be related to events that have overwhelmed the individual. Patients with dissociative amnesia may be unaware of their amnesia, so-called amnesia for amnesia. It is only on close and careful questioning or full recovery from their disorder that they begin to realize how much of their memory was missing. Many of our patients have realized the serious degree of their amnesia only in retrospect. Loss of critical function. Critical thinking requires recognition of details and nuances, and this ability is often impaired in trauma survivors. They tend to have more global responses and thoughts than non-abused individuals. These inclinations may be found in one or more dissociative parts of the personality. Some dissociative parts have difficulty thinking rationally, logically, and clearly. Others may have excellent critical faculties in relation to certain issues such as work, but cannot apply the same logic and rationality in their approach to other parts of the personality, or to a particular behavior such as self-injury. Critical faculties can be available to certain parts of the personality, such as a wise, objective part, but far less available to other parts. Loss of mental skills. Cognitive impairments in traumatized children and traumatized adults have been reported and include problems with memory, concentration, attention, planning, and judgment. Frank cognitive impairments can occur in up to a third of chronically traumatized adults. The marked influctuations in knowledge and skills displayed by many traumatized children and adults and their difficulty in learning from experience often relate to alternations among dissociative parts. For example, many ANPs but not EPs have a degree of depersonalization. This symptom is associated with attentional parts. Loss of affect. Affect dysregulation is a common difficulty in mental health populations, particularly in traumatized individuals. Affect dysregulation may occur because of switching among parts of the personality that experience diverse effects that are not integrated with each other, and that thus remain unmodulated. The diminution of affect in traumatized individuals is prominent and can be often traced to structural dissociation. There is a degree of emotional numbing in the present so that patients as ANP complain of feeling two-dimensional or like zombies, one-dimensional cardboard figures or robots. There also may be a marked absence of emotion regarding the traumatic experience. Dissociation between observing EP and a loss of affect and an experiencing EP has been described as one form of depersonalization, which is very common in individuals with different types of traumatization. Loss of needs, wishes, and fantasies. In their numb and detached condition, survivors as ANP often have dissociated not only painful emotions, but also painful needs, such as needs for attachment, wishes, such as yearning for good parents. Many traumatized individuals experience tremendous ambivalence regarding attachment and dependency. These needs are often kept by childlike EPs, enabling survivors as ANP to believe that they have no desire to be dependent. The next video will get into negative somatoform dissociative symptoms, and we will go from there. Follow me if you don't want to miss it.